Roshamuul has one of the most exciting and enigmatic stories in Tibia. It is a unique city, literally made of dreams and materialized in buildings that we can find destroyed by a great catastrophe that occurred in a time very far from today. That is, first of all, we must take into account that probably some races or entities named in this story no longer exist as such in Tibia. On the other hand, some details written in the torn-out page, which are scattered throughout Roshamuul, give us clues to the approximate time these events occurred. These details place us in a time close to the God Wars. In fact, these events probably happened in the last historical stretch of that war. This time goes back to when the gods created the first races that we know today as the Ancients. The mysterious race that inhabited this place had an ability to handle the stuff of dreams with great ease. In this way, they built buildings, the weather and devices with a technological advance never seen before, and even today, something similar can hardly be found. First, to contextualize the entire audience that is not related to these issues, we will start by talking about basic concepts: dreams. The dream world is literally another dimension, different than the one we know. Most of the ordinary cities in Tibia are located on an existential plane that corresponds to our reality, the physical plane shaped by the gods in the origin. As for the dimension of dreams, it corresponds to an parallel dimension, unattainable for human beings and ordinary creatures. Some of the first creations made by the gods were blessed with the ability to leave this existential plane and inhabit another dimension. An example of these cities are the winter courts and the summer courts in which the Dreamborn live nowadays. The Dreamborn are an elven caste, which, as its name says, were born from pleasant dreams and were materialized by hands of its creator, an elf. To explain the abstract concept of dreams and parallel dimensions, it should be mentioned that not all elves have this advanced quality, and only a few special castes develop these abilities. According to the handful of books and the few NPCs who know about this topic regarding the ability of elves and dreams, we can assure that the construction of an inhabitable dream dimension is not an easy task, not even for elves. It consists of inhabiting one's dream, taking the dreams of any other creature in Tibia, molding and materializing them into something physical, thus creating a pocket dimension, attainable only for them. It's possible that this ability was initially used for refuge purposes in the God Wars, which is based on a constant war between the races and the gods, who fought for the power of creation and supremacy. Now that we understand these basics, let's delve into what really happened on Roshamuul. The most important part of this story can be found in some papers scattered around Roshamuul, written by an individual who belonged to the race that created and inhabited Roshamuul. This race describes itself as a people, a nation which through stolen dreams was able to build the city, its climate and its enigmatic devices. Their allies and also enemies called them dreamstealers, dreampires, among others, although they prefer to use themselves simply as dreamers. Somewhere in their history, the incredible dream-wielding skills this race developed sparked a hunger for ambition, power, and knowledge. Thus, a part of this people convinced some leaders of their race not to fight anymore on behalf of the gods. Rather, they sought to become independent and take advantage of their abilities in better goals. They will be able to extend their lives longer than normal thanks to the stolen dreams, thus achieving to live much longer than they were destined to. In fact, the time they have lived has been so long that they are no longer able to remember their own beginnings. The antiquity of these documents is reflected in parts of the text, such as when he mentions that he writes said history in the language of the gods, an extremely ancient language only spoken by ancient races. However, the text is fully readable to us as humans. What does this mean? Is the language of the gods the human language? Well, not really. The explanation of this fact comes next, when the author says that he uses said language with the aim that the vanity of the gods be enough to preserve his writings over the years. This way, when their followers arrive at this place, they will be aware of the history that happened there. Generally, these types of documents in Tibia are a kind of mind games and need to be read over and over again. If reading has been of any use in Tibia, it's to understand this type of writing. Although at no time do I want to say that it is an easy task for anyone. In this case, the vanity of the gods is a concept repeated in a handful of books, including Genesis. Many gods are described as vain, wanting to be named through history and its inhabitants, even though their presence is almost non-existent in our daily lives. Probably naming them gives them more power and more presence. Perhaps something similar to Varifor. Or maybe it's just to boost their ego. Here we could get into a philosophical discussion of what really is a god in Tibia and whether a god should have vanity, but even the theme of fame and recognition in Tibian law is used for ambitious ends like ascension. But back to the topic at hand. The author purposely wrote these documents in the language of the gods so that the gods themselves would make sure to preserve the document against the ravages of time. In addition to a certain way, this fact makes clear the insight and closeness of the author with the gods. On the other hand, he decides to write the text on paper and not on a dream crystal, which was the way he communicated with his people. This decision is made so that his peers will not read an ordinary paper, therefore, the author's story would remain secret and would withstand the passage of time. It is worth mentioning here that the theme of the dream crystal is not to be taken lightly. As for his native language, the author tells us that that language is not through vocal cords, but rather a thought pattern based on dreams and untranslatable for any language. This fact gives us to understand that the mentioned dream crystals probably have to do with their form of communication, which leads us to speculate on possible theories and connections, but we will see that later so as not to deviate from the story itself. This creator race of Roshamuul was proud and cruel, though many of their writings contradict these claims. For example, trying to justify his actions is an act of repentance, even if the author intends to deny it. For example, a demon would never talk about his atrocities as a secret, rather he would say it as an achievement and not afraid to hide it. On the other hand, he mentions that over time, part of his people decided to take this path and that even so, his goals became more perverse and individualistic. That is, another part of his people did not follow his path and we do not really know what they were like in the beginning. Perhaps, as the author himself says, he has forgotten his beginning since he has lived for so many years that he confuses reality with his origins, which was built through deceit and lies, ambition and power. He even claims that the dreams, both theirs and the stolen dreams, were initially built to give them shelter from wars. They built weapons for war in their own way, such as the Dream Catcher, which is a monument to the power they possessed. From there they planned and began to emerge as a powerful race due to their unique abilities in managing dreams. Their level increased to such an extent that they even rivaled Zathratha's favorite pets, demons. For the same reason, they were considered part of Zathratha's plans, allying with the more powerful demons. This led to some encounters between them, where there were battles of ego and power, managing to equalize in power, thus managing to survive until that fateful day. One day a request came to the council, which was to create a prison made of dreams. Thus using barriers between the worlds as a tool to keep captive the power of all creatures, locking them up and torturing them for all eternity. The ambition of the plan was such that they did not hesitate to contribute with their knowledge. But little did they know what awaited them. His people ventured into the project with ambition. The resources and knowledge were shared by the other allied races with Zathrath, although not in a very good way. Test prisoners were sent to him to experiment with prisons. It was then that the plans began to change course a bit. Many requests were not agreed upon in the initial plans and took their investigations to another end. The prisons were no longer meant for powerful normal entities, rather they could wreak havoc on even a lesser god back. Then, more demonic advisors came to the prison facility to inspect the construction. It is at this point that the author feels fear, revealing his benign nature and questions his actions that he has committed. However, he decides to continue, since he says he prefers to end once and for all his long life built through lies, ambition and deception. The atmosphere began to get cloudy, more and more demons began to walk on the city that had cost them so much to build. Until one day, a few demons called the leaders of the Dreamers to a secret meeting. In this meeting not only were several powerful demons present, but also the gods were involved, where secret plans were discussed, stories never told before which led to binding vows. The purpose of the meeting was not a plan against the enemies, but rather against a large part of their own allies, who were declared traitors. These allies were the demon princes themselves. The most disturbing thing in the matter is that the demon princes had not allied themselves with their enemies, but rather with a third power, even feared by the great gods. His new enemy had a name: Varifor.